My brother pointed at me from across the conference table and said, loud enough for every single person in that room to hear, "She has no business being here. She never did." I didn't move. I didn't blink. I folded my hands on top of the leather portfolio in front of me, and I looked at him. The way you look at something you've already decided about a long time ago. The room went very quiet. There were 11 people at that table. 3 were partners from the acquisition firm. 2 were our company's outside counsel. 1 was our CFO, a man named Gerald who had worked for my father for 22 years, and who, at that particular moment, was studying the grain of the mahogany tabletop like it contained the answer to every question he'd ever had. The rest were board members, most of whom my brother had personally appointed in the 4 years since our father died. My brother was still standing. His face was red in the way it got when he felt cornered, which he always mistook for looking powerful. "I'm serious," he said. "Someone tell me why she's here." One of the acquisition partners, a woman in a charcoal blazer who had introduced herself as the lead on the deal, glanced at me. Just a quick look. Then she wrote something on the notepad in front of her. I still didn't say anything. My brother sat down. He smoothed his tie. He looked around the table expecting someone to agree with him, and when nobody did, he made a sound in his throat like he was clearing away the whole moment. "Fine," he said. "Let's continue." But I knew, sitting there with my hands folded and my face perfectly still, that nothing about the next 2 hours was going to go the way he had planned. My father built Calloway Integrated Systems from a single government contract in 1987. By the time I was born, it was a mid-sized defense subcontracting firm with about 300 employees and a solid reputation for precision components manufacturing. Not glamorous, not the kind of company that ends up in Forbes, but profitable, consistent, and built on 30 years of relationships my father cultivated one handshake at a time. My brother is 8 years older than me. When I was still in elementary school, he was already being groomed. He went to the right business school, came home, and took a position as VP of operations. My father never made a decision without consulting him. At family dinners, my brother talked about quarterly margins and my father listened like he was hearing scripture. I was never part of that conversation. I wasn't excluded because I was unintelligent. I was excluded because I was a girl, and my father, for all his good qualities, had a blind spot the size of the Atlantic Ocean when it came to what women were capable of in a boardroom. He loved me. I know he did. But love and respect are 2 different things. And he was generous with the first, and withholding with the second. When I graduated with a degree in electrical engineering, summa cum laude, my father said he was proud. When I got my MBA 2 years later, he said I was impressive. When I asked him if there was a place for me at Calloway, he said he'd think about it. He thought about it for 3 years. Eventually, he gave me a position in product development. Not leadership, not strategy. A mid-level role that had nothing to do with the company's direction and everything to do with keeping me busy enough that I wouldn't keep asking. I took the job, and while I was in it, I did what engineers do. I paid attention to every system, every inefficiency, every process that was bleeding money or time. I documented everything. I built relationships with vendors my brother had never bothered to learn the names of. I quietly developed a proprietary calibration protocol for one of our core product lines that cut defect rates by 31%. My brother's response, when I presented the results to the leadership team, was to ask whether I'd cleared the methodology with legal before implementing it. I had. I'd also filed a patent on it, in my own name. That was 3 years before our father died. When our father passed, he left the company to both of us. Equal shares, 30% each, with the remaining 40% split among 4 long-term board members. My brother became CEO by a board vote that, I later learned, he had been campaigning for privately in the weeks before our father's death, while our father was still in the hospital. Within 6 months, my role at the company had been restructured out of existence. He didn't fire me outright. He eliminated the department, reorganized it under a VP who reported to him directly. The work I had been doing simply became someone else's responsibility, and I became, in the official org chart, nothing. I requested a meeting. He gave me 40 minutes between 2 other appointments. He told me the company needed to evolve, that he was streamlining, that he had nothing but respect for what I'd contributed. He used the word contributed the way people use it when they want to make something sound meaningful without actually meaning it. I asked him directly, was there another role for me at Calloway? He said he'd look into it. I waited 8 weeks. No call. So I left. What my brother did not know, because he had never paid close enough attention to understand it, was that the patent I filed 3 years earlier covered the calibration protocol that was now embedded in every precision component Calloway manufactured. Our biggest defense contract, the one that made up 42% of the company's annual revenue, required components built to that exact specification. My patent, my name. For 4 years, I had been licensing it to Calloway at a rate that was, to be honest, well below market, because it was my father's company. And even after everything, I wasn't trying to burn it down, but I had also, quietly and carefully, spent those 4 years doing something else. I had been consulting for Meridian Defense Group, Meridian was not a household name. It didn't need to be. It was a $4.2 billion acquisition firm that specialized in buying mid-market defense and aerospace subcontractors, restructuring them, and integrating them into a larger portfolio. They had been looking at Calloway for 2 years. I knew this because they had hired me, 18 months earlier, to conduct an independent technical assessment of Calloway's product line and intellectual property position. They didn't know I was a shareholder when they hired me. I disclosed that once I was engaged, they didn't care. They wanted my expertise, and more specifically, they wanted my assessment of the patent portfolio, which meant they wanted my assessment of my own patent, which I gave them with complete honesty. My assessment was that the patent was the most valuable asset the company owned. More valuable than the equipment, the facility, the contracts, or the brand. My assessment was also that without a licensing agreement with the patent holder, the company's flagship product line could not legally be manufactured. I was the patent holder. Meridian's lead acquisition partner, the woman in the charcoal blazer sitting across from me at that table, had known exactly who I was for 14 months. My brother initiated the sale process himself. Calloway had been having a rough 18 months. He had made 2 acquisitions that underperformed, taken on debt to fund a facility expansion that got delayed by supply chain issues, and lost a mid-size contract to a competitor. The board was nervous. He needed an exit. He reached out to 3 firms. Meridian responded first, and with the most serious interest. My brother did not tell me about the sale process. I found out from Gerald, the CFO, who called me one evening and spoke quietly, like someone who wasn't sure he was doing the right thing but was doing it anyway. "They're moving fast," Gerald said. "Letter of intent is almost done. He's planning to announce to the board next Thursday." I thanked him. I told him I'd see him Thursday. My brother did not invite me to the board meeting. I was still a 30% shareholder. Under the company's bylaws, I had every right to attend. I showed up anyway, portfolio under my arm. And when I walked through the conference room door and my brother looked up and saw me, I watched something move across his face that I can only describe as the specific kind of panic that comes from realizing you forgot to account for something important. He recovered quickly. He always did. "This meeting is for board members," he said. "I'm a shareholder," I said. "The bylaws don't require board membership for shareholder attendance at strategic transaction meetings." Section 7, paragraph 3. Gerald had sent me the bylaws the night before. I had read them twice. My brother looked at the outside counsel. The outside counsel looked at his papers. He confirmed, quietly, that I was correct, which is how I ended up in that seat, watching my brother point at me and tell 11 people that I had no business being there. After he sat down and said, "Fine, let's continue," the meeting proceeded the way these meetings do. The Meridian team presented their structure. A number came out. My brother nodded along with the satisfaction of someone who believes he is the smartest person in the room because no one has corrected him yet. There was a section of the presentation on intellectual property. The lead partner, her name was Sandra, went through it methodically. She listed the patents. When she got to mine, she read the patent number and the filing date and the description without inflection. My brother said, "That's one of our core production patents. It's part of the IP package we're conveying with the sale." Sandra made a small mark on her notepad. "Right," she said. "We'll want to confirm the ownership structure on that one. It's owned by the company," my brother said. I uncapped my pen. I wrote a single line on the notepad in front of me and slid it across the table to the outside counsel. He read it. He went very still. Sandra looked up from her papers. "Mr. Calloway," she said, "we've completed our IP due diligence. The patent registered under filing number 4722009CE is not owned by Calloway Integrated Systems. It's licensed to the company by the individual inventor." My brother frowned. "That's not right. It's in the USPTO records," Sandra said. "It's also in the licensing agreement your company has maintained for the past 4 years. "What licensing agreement?" Gerald cleared his throat. "It's in the financials. Line item under licensing fees, intellectual property, external. It's been there since Q3 of year 1. My brother turned to Gerald with a look I had seen before. The look that meant someone was about to have a very bad week. "Why didn't I know about this?" he said. Gerald said, carefully. "You signed the original agreement." The room absorbed this. My brother turned to me slowly. I watched him put it together. I could see the exact moment it clicked. The way you can see a car approaching an intersection and know, a second before it happens, what's about to occur. "You," he said. I didn't answer. "You own that patent. Still nothing from me. You've been collecting licensing fees from your own family's company." I set my pen down. I folded my hands. "It's my intellectual property," I said. "Developed on my own time, with my own resources, before I held any official role at Calloway. The agreement was reviewed and signed by company counsel, and by you. At below market rate, I'll note. Below market." He stopped. Started again. "You've been setting a trap. I've been protecting my IP," I said, "the same way any inventor would." He pushed back from the table slightly. His voice went up. She's been undermining this company for years. She's been waiting for this moment. That's what this is. She wants to blow up this deal because she's bitter. She's always been bitter. She was passed over and she never got over it. He looked around the table. She is not a serious business person. She is a disgruntled family member who got lucky with one patent and has spent 4 years making herself a problem. Don't let her derail this. I looked at Sandra. Sandra looked at me. Then she looked at my brother. Mr. Calloway, she said. I think there may be some context here that would be helpful. He spread his hands. By all means. Sandra folded her hands on the table in a way that reminded me, a little, of how I was sitting. Meridian has been conducting technical due diligence on this acquisition for 14 months. As part of that process, we engaged an independent consultant to assess the company's product line and IP position. That consultant's assessment was instrumental in our decision to proceed with this offer. She paused. That consultant is sitting at this table. My brother turned to me so fast I heard his chair move. You, he said again. But it sounded different this time. I disclosed my shareholder status to Meridian at the start of my engagement, I said. Everything was above board. You can review the conflict disclosure documentation if you'd like. You worked against your own company. I worked for a client who was evaluating your company, I said. My analysis was objective. If it had been unfavorable, you wouldn't have received an offer. You received an offer because the underlying business has value. Specifically, it has value because of the IP I developed. He stood up. This is a conflict of interest. This is sabotage. I want her removed from this room. I want legal on the phone right now. Richard. Sandra's voice was very level. She hadn't raised it once. Please sit down. He looked at her. Please, she said again. He sat. She opened the folder in front of her and removed a single document. She slid it to the center of the table. Meridian's offer is contingent on several conditions. I'd like to walk through them now, because I think the conversation we've been having is actually relevant to condition number 3. She clicked her pen. Condition 1. Clean title transfer of all IP assets, including resolution of any licensing arrangements. Condition 2. Continuity of key technical personnel. Condition 3. She looked up. Condition 3 is that the post-acquisition technical leadership structure includes the inventor of the core production patent in an executive capacity. The room was completely silent. My brother said, What? We're not acquiring a facility, Sandra said. We're acquiring a capability. The capability is embedded in the patent. The patent is most effectively deployed by the person who developed it. Our offer is structured around that assumption. You want her involved? We require it. As a condition of the deal, my brother's face did something I don't have a good word for. It moved through several things very fast. Disbelief, fury, the beginning of understanding. Something that looked almost like nausea. She set this up, he said. She planned this from the beginning. She got herself hired by Meridian so she was referred to us by a mutual contact 18 months ago, Sandra said. We engaged her because of her technical credentials. Her analysis proved accurate in every particular. That's not a conspiracy. That's competence. He turned to the board members. You see what's happening? You see how she's maneuvered this? She's been working against us. She's using this deal to take over, to get what she always wanted because she couldn't earn it. Couldn't earn it. I said it quietly, not angry, just precise. He stopped. I developed the patent that drives 42% of your revenue, I said. I spent 4 years licensing it to you below market because it was my father's company. I conducted a 14-month technical assessment that was accurate enough that a $4 billion acquisition firm built their offer around it. I have an engineering degree and an MBA, and I have been in this industry for 10 years. I paused. Which part, specifically, was not earned? He had no answer. I hadn't expected one. What happened next took about 90 minutes. And I'm going to be honest. Most of it was procedural. There were phone calls. There were documents pulled and reviewed. The outside counsel asked for a brief recess. Sandra's colleagues conferred quietly among themselves. My brother spent most of it trying to find a version of events that worked in his favor. And there wasn't one. And watching him search for it was something I won't describe in detail because it was painful in a way that had nothing to do with satisfaction. What I can tell you is that by the end of those 90 minutes, the following had been established. The patent was mine. Had always been mine. The licensing agreement was valid, above board, and had been signed by my brother himself 4 years prior without, apparently, fully understanding what he was signing. His own legal team had reviewed it and approved it. This was not my problem. The acquisition could not proceed without my participation, because Meridian would not acquire a company whose core IP was encumbered by a third-party license they couldn't resolve. Resolving it either meant buying the patent from me separately, which I was willing to discuss, or bringing me in as part of the deal, which was Meridian's strong preference. As a 30% shareholder, I also had rights in this transaction that my brother had not accounted for when he designed the process to exclude me. When the recess ended and everyone returned to the table, my brother sat across from me and he looked different. Not broken. He was too armored for that. But diminished. In some way I didn't have satisfaction in, only recognition. Sandra outlined the revised path forward. The deal could continue on an adjusted timeline. There would need to be negotiations around my role, around the IP, around the structure of the acquisition. It was solvable. Meridian remained interested. I have one question, my brother said. Sandra nodded. He looked at me. Did you know, when you took the consulting engagement, that it would lead here? I thought about the question. I wanted to give him an honest answer, because after everything, I thought he deserved at least that. I knew, I said, that if I did my job well, the analysis would speak for itself. I knew the IP position was significant. I didn't know what Meridian would decide to do with that information. I paused. I didn't arrange this. I just didn't hide from it. He nodded once, like he was filing something away. Did Dad know? He asked. About the patent. About what it was worth. He knew I'd filed it, I said. I don't think he ever looked at what it covered. Something moved across my brother's face. Just for a second. Then it was gone. Okay, he said. And he didn't say anything else for a long time. The deal closed 11 weeks later. I won't walk through every negotiation, every conference call, every moment, when it almost fell apart, and then didn't. What matters is the outcome. The IP was purchased from me at fair market value as part of the transaction. I won't say the number, but I will say it was enough that I sat in my car in the parking garage after signing, and felt a strange, weightless calm, like something I had been carrying for a very long time had finally been set down. I came on as Chief Technology Officer of the combined entity. Not because I wanted to punish my brother, not because I needed the title, but because Sandra had been right. The capability was real, and the right thing to do with a real capability is use it. My brother transitioned out of the CEO role as part of the acquisition terms. He remained a shareholder, obviously. He wasn't erased. But the company he had spent 4 years running was no longer his to run, and the person who had spent those same 4 years being told she had no business being there was now responsible for the technical direction of a $4.2 billion portfolio. He called me the week after close. I almost didn't answer. I want to say something, he said. I waited. Dad made mistakes, he said. And I repeated them. I know that. A pause. I'm not saying this to ask for anything. I'm just saying it. I sat with that for a moment. I know, I said. I know you know. It wasn't forgiveness. Exactly. Forgiveness takes time, and I'm not going to pretend I was at the end of that road. But it was acknowledgement, and sometimes acknowledgement is where things have to start. Gerald retired 8 months after the acquisition closed. At his retirement dinner, he gave a short speech that mentioned, among other things, that the best decision he made in 26 years at Calloway was the phone call he placed one evening to let me know about a board meeting I hadn't been invited to. He got a long round of applause for that. I sat at the table and looked at my water glass and tried to keep my face composed, which I managed, mostly. The conference room on the 14th floor, the one with the mahogany table where my brother had pointed at me and said I had no business being there, is still the main boardroom. I'm in it every week. I don't think about that day much anymore. But sometimes, when I'm the last one in the room after a meeting, I sit in my chair for a moment before I get up. Not out of triumph, not out of anything dramatic, just because I earned the right to sit there, and for a long time the people around me didn't see it, and now they do, and sometimes the appropriate response to a thing like that is simply to be still and let it be true. I was never unstable. I was never incompetent. I was never an embarrassment. I was patient, and patience, it turns out, compounds.